Senators Bridges, Excused.
Cook. Corum. Court. Crowder. Danielson. Donovan. Finberg. Fields. Foote. Foote.
Excused.
Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Hill. Heisey. Holbert. Lee. Lee. Lundeen. Marvel. Moreno. Pedersen.
Excused.
Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story. Tate. Todd. Williams. Winter. Woodward. Zenzinger. Mr. President.
Here, with 32 present, 0 absent, 3 excused, we have a quorum. Senator Story, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
Approval of the Journal. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the Journal of Monday, April 1st, 2019 be dispensed with and the Journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted.
Yes, it is.
That's right.
Yes, it is.
He just told me they'll
They're
work on
lying to
the
you.
They just, no, they're not. They would not lie to me. They just told me they will take back the compromise I suggested and see if they can make it work. So,
Okay.
Committee reports.
April 1st, 2019, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1205 be referred favorably to Committee on Appropriations. April 1st, 2019, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1224 be amended as follows. As so amended, be referred to Committee of the Whole with a favorable recommendation. A recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. April 1st, 2019, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 193 be amended as follows. As so amended, be referred to Committee on Finance with a favorable recommendation.
Mr. Carpenter, please add Senator Bridges to the roll call. Members, as is customary, please join me in welcoming the Speaker of the House, Mr. Speaker Frank McNulty, to the Senate. Senate Services.
Correctly printed, Senate Bill 225, 226, 227, 228, and 229. Correctly re-revised. House Bill 1198. Correctly enrolled. Senate Bill 138.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for purposes of consideration of resolutions.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted. The Senate will proceed out of order for considerations of resolutions. Consideration of resolutions. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Resolution 008.
Senate Resolution 8 by Senator Fields concerning recognition of the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move resolution, what's the number of it? Senate Resolution 8.
To the resolution, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, today, April, is considered Child Abuse Prevention Month. And that's why you may see people in the Capitol wearing blue, because that's the national color to prevent child abuse, not only in the state of Colorado, but across the nation. So I would like the resolution to be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter, please read Resolution 008 at length.
Senate Resolution 8 by Senator Fields concerning recognition of the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas, children are key to the state's future success, prosperity, and quality of life. But while children are our most precious resource, they are also our most vulnerable. And whereas, children have a right to thrive, learn, and grow to their full potential. And whereas, the prevention of child abuse and neglect strengthens Colorado's families and communities and ensures the opportunity for children to develop in healthy, trusting families, schools, and neighborhoods that build the foundation of society. And whereas, we all play a role in preventing child abuse and neglect, and there are ways everyone can get involved to help a child. Even those individuals who aren't raising a child are working with children every day. Just one person has the power to make an extraordinary difference in the lives of both children and families. And whereas, community leaders, policymakers, and elected officials play a unique role in building a safe and supportive Colorado for kids by understanding the programs and policies that support child maltreatment prevention, listening to the needs of the parents in our communities, and examining community planning through this lens to build healthy communities that strengthen families. And whereas, Colorado is currently implementing initiatives for improving the safety and well-being of children and families across Colorado. And whereas, we must come together as partners to keep children safe, ensure that the voices of our children are heard by all, and extend a helping hand to children and families in need. And whereas, the Colorado Senate calls upon all Coloradans to provide safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, so that we can ensure that Colorado's children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders and help to secure the future of our communities, state, and nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 72nd General Assembly of the State of Colorado that we, the members of the Senate, proclaim April 2019 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Colorado, that we encourage every person to play a role in preventing child abuse and neglect, and that we call upon all citizens, community and faith-based organizations, businesses, and government agencies of Colorado to increase their efforts to strengthen Colorado's families, thereby strengthening this community and the state of Colorado. Be it further resolved that copies of this resolution be sent to Jade Woodard, Executive Director of Illuminate Colorado.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you may be seated. On your desk, you should have a pinwheel and some literature just explaining what we all can do to play a very important role to prevent child abuse and neglect by strengthening families. As you know, children don't get a chance to choose their childhood. And far too often, we have children who are stuck in family situations that cause them maybe to have food insecurities. They may have a parent member that may be dealing with some form of addiction. But what we have in the state of Colorado, we have this collaborative network of organizations around the state that are working to protect our kids from neglect and abuse. When I look at some of the agencies that's doing this work, they're doing it block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. They're doing it on the Front Range. They're doing it in the rural areas, in the urban centers. We have people that are dedicated to advocacy as it relates to protecting kids from neglect and abuse. Because when we help parents, we're helping families. So no matter where they are in the state, there's an opportunity for them to get resources. I've been down here since 2010, and I can remember when we first introduced the crisis hotline, where people could call any time that they expected abuse and neglect. That number is listed on your flyer. It's call 844 Colorado for Kids to report suspected abuse or neglect. So members, I hope that you stand in support with me in ensuring that we do all we can to prevent child abuse and neglect. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion regarding Senate Resolution 008? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Resolution 008. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 2 excused, Senate Resolution 008 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd ask that the current roll call be assigned or be noted as co-sponsors.
Senator Fields, I will fine you $1 for referring to me as the chair. And seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors on Senate Resolution 008.
Thank you, Mr. President. You got it. Thank you, Senator.
Considerations of resolutions. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Resolution 009.
Senate Resolution 9 by Senators Zenzinger and Gonzalez concerning the designation of April 2nd, 2019 as Equal Pay Day in Colorado and in connection therewith acknowledging the persistent problem of wage disparity.
Senator Zenzinger.
I move Senate Resolution 009. And I would ask the clerk to please read the resolution.
Mr. Carpenter, please read Senate Resolution 009.
Senate Resolution 9 by Senators Zenzinger and Gonzalez concerning the designation of April 2nd, 2019 as Equal Pay Day in Colorado and in connection therewith acknowledging the persistent problem of wage disparity. Whereas, 55 years after the passage of the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, women, particularly women of color, continue to suffer the consequences of being paid less than men for doing the same work. And whereas, according to a report released in 2018 by the Women's Foundation of Colorado and the Institute for Women's Policy Research, Colorado women earn just 86 cents on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. And whereas, based on its 2018 research, the Institute for Women's Policy Research estimates that women in Colorado will not receive equal pay until 2057 if progress continues at the same rate it has since 1960. And whereas, the wage gap is not only discernible by sex, but also by race and ethnicity. And whereas, a comparison of the earnings of women of each racial and ethnic group to the earnings of white men showed that white women in Colorado earn 78 cents for every dollar earned by the average white man, followed by Asian Pacific Islander women at 70 cents, black women at 63 cents, indigenous women at 56 cents, and Latino women at only 54 cents. And whereas, based on today's wage gap, over the course of a 40-year career, a white woman will lose $403,440, a black woman would lose $867,920, and a Latino woman would lose $1,056,120. And whereas, a lifetime of lower pay means women have less income to save for retirement and less income counted in a Social Security or pension benefit formula. And whereas, earnings for both female and male full-time workers tend to increase with age, though earnings increase more slowly after age 45 and even decrease after age 55, the gender pay gap also grows with age, and differences among older workers are often considerably larger than differences among younger workers. And whereas, in 2016, among full-time workers ages 20 to 24, women were paid 96% of what men were paid on a weekly basis. But as workers grow older and progress in their careers, median earnings for women grow more slowly than median earnings for men. From ages 25 to 54, women are typically paid 78 to 89% of what men are paid, depending on age. And by the time workers reach ages 55 to 64, women are paid only 74% of what men are paid. And whereas, there exists a strong business and public interest case for equal pay for equal work. And whereas equal pay would cut the Colorado poverty rate in half from 5.6% to 2.8%. And whereas equal pay policies can be implemented simply and without undue costs or hardship in both the public and private sectors. And whereas closing the pay gap between men and women strengthens the security of families and eases future retirement costs while enhancing the Colorado economy by raising gross domestic product by $9.2 billion. Whereas Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019, is the day chosen to symbolize the time of year at which the average wage paid to American women begin to catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year for the same work. And whereas we recognize that the problem of pay disparity impacts different communities across the state more significantly, Asian Women's Day of Equal Pay would be March 5th, White Women's Day of Equal Pay would be April 19th, Black Women's Day of Equal Pay would be August 22nd, Indigenous Women's Day of Equal Pay would be September 23rd, and Latino Women's Day of Equal Pay would be November 20th. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 72nd General Assembly of the State of Colorado that we, the members of the Colorado Senate, proclaim Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019, to be Equal Pay Day in the state of Colorado, and urge governmental agencies, nonprofit and labor organizations, businesses, and individuals to take steps to implement equal pay policies to help close the pay gap for Colorado's women and minorities. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to President Donald J. Trump, Colorado Governor Jared Polis, Colorado Lieutenant Governor Diane Primavera, and the members of Colorado's congressional delegation, United States Secretary of Labor Alexander Acosta, and Colorado Department of Labor and Employment Executive Director Joe Borrella.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you may be seated. So Equal Pay Day was originated by the National Committee on Pay Equity back in 1996 as a public awareness event to illustrate the gap between men's and women's wages. Tuesday, April 2nd, today, is the day that was chosen to symbolize that time of year at which the average wages paid to American white women began to catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year for the same work.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Buenos dias, colleagues. Today is Equal Pay Day. Today is a symbolic day that is meant to honor the relentless work of women. Well, some women. Because if it were only about gender, yeah, today might be an important day to mark. Misogyny is a real thing, and it is used to justify paying women less money for the same work. However, in a world in which it takes Latinas almost 23 months to earn what the average man earns in 12, and when we fail to center the most marginalized and the starkest inequities in our policymaking, we perpetuate the problem. If institutional racism and structural racism were not a thing, then we wouldn't have to have marked Asian American and Pacific Islanders women's Equal Pay Day on March 5th. The day that commemorates the 85 cents on the dollar that they earned compared to their white male counterparts. Or April 19th, when white women finally catch up based on their 77 cents on a white man's dollar. Or August 22nd, when black women's 61 cents finally catches up. Or September 23rd, when Native and Indigenous women's 58 cents finally catch up. Or November 20th, when Latinas 53 cents catch up to their white male counterparts. Even though we've been fighting for equity for years, in 2017 and in 2018, the pay gap actually narrowed between white women and their white male counterparts, and then widened between white women and women of color. Placing all of our focus on one identity, gender, actually can undermine the very real and very persistent ways in which both implicit and explicit racism and bias continue to permeate our society. And so if it were me, we wouldn't mark this occasion until all women achieve parity in November. But y'all, I'm tired about talking about the problems. I'm here to talk about solutions. And so yes, passing the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act will help our problems. By all means, it will help. But unless and until we bring an intersectional analysis to our policy efforts, when we ensure equal access to education, regardless of the zip code in which we live, when women of color are fairly represented in our boardrooms and here in our legislature, and when our white feminist counterparts stop utilizing only the harms of women of color as a talking point and continue and demonstrate their solidarity in real and concrete ways, when we all work together for systemic changes, that's how we're going to ensure that all Coloradans can thrive. Lastly, if it were me, we'd actually just pass policies that would make this, having to honor this holiday, obsolete. Thank you.
Senator Zenzinger.
And so, as our final closing here today, we'd like to leave you with the immortal words of Beyonce. Quote, "Men have to demand that their wives, daughters, mothers, and sisters earn more, commensurate with their qualifications and not their gender. Equality will be achieved when men and women are granted equal pay and equal respect." Thank you, members.
Is there further discussion on Senate resolution? Senator Corr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for bringing this resolution. My question to the sponsors, bill sponsors, will all senators in the room now be paid the same?
Here, here.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President, my dear President. Members, today is an equal pay day for Black women because it takes us until, takes us until August the 22nd to earn the same pay as a man. So it's not equal pay day for women that look like me. And I believe it's time for us to respect equal pay for the work that women do. I serve in the state Senate, and we all have equal pay, but if you were elected in 2019, you got a raise. So not all of us have the same level of pay, but typically we are all paid the same. But that doesn't happen in some of our corporate environments. We have women that are doing the same work as men, and they're not paid the same. I think it's time for paycheck fairness, because that's what respect is all about. We need to have respect in the workplace as it relates to paycheck fairness. A woman who's working, who may be that bread earner in that home, needs to pay for child care, she needs to pay for health care, she needs to go to the grocery store, she needs to buy gas, and she needs that income for her family. If you look at the resolution and if you look at the loss of revenue for a Black woman, she loses $867,000. Just imagine what she could do with that money. Her child maybe could go to college and not have to take out a student loan. Perhaps she could purchase a home. There's so much more that she could have done with that loss of revenue. And when a woman is not earning the same as a man, it doesn't impact our economy because she's not able to contribute at the same level as men. I think that if women were paid equally, we wouldn't have too much poverty in the state of Colorado. We could probably reduce poverty by maybe 2 or 3% if women were paid the same as men. Why should it take an African American woman to work 4 additional months to catch up with a man's earning? That's just not right. That's not fair. And this is an issue that's been long-standing for a very long time, and I read some research that says that the time women will be getting equal pay, it will be 2057. I have 4 granddaughters. And when they graduate from high school and college and they start earning a living, I want them to be paid the same. I don't want them to still have to struggle with the battles of inequality as it relates to paycheck fairness. So members, it's time that we consider doing all we can do to close and to shrink that gap to make sure that there is equity and fairness in paychecks for women across our state and the nation. Support this resolution.
Senator Marble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know it's not going to come to any surprise that I'm going to be voting no on this resolution. I haven't voted no in the past, and I've given my reasons, and you all know that numbers can say whatever you want them to say. It's okay for the legislators to make less, even the senior legislators, than those new ones coming in. This includes men of color, this includes women of color, this includes everyone. Not all white men make the same as every white man in a job. It's diversified across the board. It's just not a given that anybody is going to be making the same. It doesn't matter if you're a white man or a purple man. People are hired at different levels in construction, white-collar jobs, even at the fast food drive-in. They have a starting pay, and then they graduate up. But I'm going to tell you why I've become a little bit more against this resolution than I have in the past. And that's because I feel so much anger in this resolution, but I'm not sure where it's directed. And that's what I'm having a problem with. I'm not mad at anybody. I don't care how much you make. I don't care where you work. I'm just glad you do a damn good job at what you're hired to do. You negotiate, you do what you can to make your life the best. I'm a single mom. There's other single moms here. It's single dads. Life's been pretty great to me, and I have no complaints. Living on hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. Not exactly health food for kids, but I'm not going to say that we were food deprived. Not by any means. We learned a lot, and we made a great life out of taking risks and working together. Even my kids did. I don't feel cheated. I feel blessed. I feel blessed to live here in the state of Colorado, to have you as my friends, my colleagues. Even though I am making $10,000 less a year, and will be doing that again next year, as are other colleagues, but you know what? That's how it is, but it's okay for us, and we aren't complaining. But here we get up and rant and rave over something that I'm not sure I agree with all the numbers. And I know that in my family, the Mexicans, the Native Americans, the Chinese, the Muslim, the Jews, they're all making what they can, and we've never talked about somebody being paid more than another for doing a job. It's never entered in. Man, woman, we all work hard and we all feel blessed. And I just can't take part in something that is so focused against a white man. Because frankly, I feel white men have done a lot for this country and for this legislature, as all men have. And I want to thank them. And I really want to say how grateful I am to be working side by side with all of you.
Is there further discussion? Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make it clear that as a white man, I strongly support today's resolution. There are facts about the world that exist independent of my ability to change anything about me, and those facts about the world are facts. It is absolutely ludicrous that someone's gender has an impact on how much they make. But that is a fact of the world. And as a straight white man, it doesn't offend me when we get up here and talk about facts, especially when we talk about facts that need to change. And this needs to change. I urge an aye vote on the resolution.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Resolution 009. Are there any no votes? Senators Marble, Cook, Woodward. With a vote of 30 ayes, 3 no votes, 0 absent, and 2 excused, Senate Resolution 009 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Danielson, Donovan, the Majority Leader, Moreno, Todd, Janal, Bridges, Fields, Rodriguez, Story, Lee, Winter, Court, Williams. Please add the President. General order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There has been a request to remove House Bill 1031 and Senate Bill 167 from the second reading of bills consent calendar.
As requested, House Bill 1031 and Senate Bill 167 will be removed from the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole for general order second reading of bills consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for consideration as general order second reading bills, and Senator Moreno will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title to all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar?
House Bill 1038 by Representatives Durant, Latte, and Senators Janal and Story concerning dental services for pregnant women covered under the Children's Basic Health Plan and in connection therewith, making an appropriation. House Bill 1069 by Representative Jackson and Senator Danielson concerning the certification of sign language interpreters for the purpose of title protection in connection therewith, making an appropriation. House Bill 1150 by Representatives Tatone and Senator Danielson concerning the recreation of the Consumer Insurance Council as an advisory body of the Commissioner of Insurance.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the adoption of all the bills on the consent calendar, and there are not going to be any associated committee reports, which includes House Bill 1038, House Bill 1069, and House Bill 1150.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The body will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee begs the report citing serious and following test bills being second reading that makes following recommendation on House Bill 1038, House Bill 1069, House Bill 1150 passed second reading order revised place counted for their final passage.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 33 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 2 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. House Bill 1038, House Bill 1069, House Bill 1150 passed on second reading, ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General order, second reading of bills. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole for consideration of general order second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for consideration of the general order second reading of bills, and Senator Moreno will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title of the House Bill 1172?
House Bill 1172 by Representatives Weissman, Senators Gardner, and Cook concerning organizational recodification of Title 12 of the Colorado Revised Statutes in connection with limiting substantive changes to those that conform to similar provisions to achieve uniformity, eliminate redundancy, or allow for consolidation of common provisions or that eliminate provisions that are archaic or obsolete.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the most important bill of the on the 89th legislative day of this 72nd General Assembly, House Bill 1172 on second reading.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I withdraw my request that 1172 be read at length.
Is there discussion on House Bill 1172? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1172. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 1172 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title of the Senate Bill 182?
Senate Bill 182 by Senators Williams and Gonzalez and Representatives Arndt and Benavidez concerning the repeal of the death penalty by the General Assembly.
Senator Gonzalez.
Good morning, colleagues. It's my honor to bring to you Senate Bill 182. I'd like to begin by this conversation with a bit of honesty. That for many of us, this has not solely been a head decision, this has also been a heart decision. Colleagues, regarding Senate Bill 182, the abolition of the death penalty, during our Judiciary Committee hearing, we heard people from all sides of the issue speak from their heads and speak from their hearts. We heard from litigators, from professors, from exonerees, from faith leaders, and from district attorneys. And colleagues, most importantly, we heard from ordinary people, the victims whose lives have forever been transformed by unconscionable violence. We heard the pain of loss manifest itself in many visceral and real ways for those victims. I will admit that before coming to the legislature, I had shied away from reading the stories of the families of victims. But as a part of this process, I felt an obligation to listen and to learn. I read the stories of the horrific crimes committed by the men on death row. During our Judiciary Committee testimony, I listened closely to the sole living survivor of the Chuck E. Cheese murders, Mr. Stevens. I listened to the pain of the daughter of the good senator from Aurora, her daughter, Miss Maisha Fields. I listened as she honored the courage of her brother and his fiancée. She made real the pain of her loss for us all to bear and to bear witness to. And so to the victims who have lost their loved ones to murder, all I can do is to listen and to appreciate the pain that you feel. I listen because I too have not navigated that same pain of loss. This is difficult to talk about, and I want to acknowledge that on the front end. On March 30th, 2008, my husband's father, John Chavez, was murdered in an alleyway in West Denver. To this day, my father-in-law's murder has never been solved. The anniversary of his death was this past Saturday. I met my future husband, Ben, in 2013. Thank you. For years, his father's death was such a deep source of pain that it was unspeakable. It was a trauma that only begat silence. Not long ago, my husband received a call from the detective who had been assigned to his father's murder investigation. Apparently, new information had been uncovered, and the lead suspect was in prison in another state. And I listened to my husband as he had to make the phone calls to his mother, to his sister, to his uncles, and to his grandfather, to tell them that because the suspect was already imprisoned, that the investigation would not continue. I listened to Ben's family ask him questions that he could not answer. Colleagues, I tell you this story because as I listened to the testimonies in our Judiciary Committee from victims' family members, I heard that same pain, grief, and rage that I have heard in my own family. I had to ask myself, in the event that the man who murdered my father-in-law were ever brought to justice, whether I could support the death penalty as punishment. The answer simply is no. of loss is unbearable, no matter the circumstances. And with all that being said, even as I mourn my father-in-law, who I never met, I stand before you as a prime sponsor of the bill to abolish the death penalty. I also want to speak openly and honestly about process. There are those who would say that this bill was not laid out in the right way, that there was not enough time to process a bill that not only required a decision on a policy, but a moral decision. As of today, Senate Bill 182 has been under consideration by this body for an entire month. I asked for more time because I wanted to make sure to give my colleagues the time that they needed in order to make their decision. And yet I'm hearing that there are still concerns and critiques about the process regarding the initial introduction of this bill. In spite of the fact that just yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a decision that reversed decades of legal precedents regarding the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution in order to return our country back to the brutal execution methods of death, like death by hanging, or executing people with disabilities, or other torturous methods of killing human beings for killing human beings. And yet that critique still remains. I don't understand it, but I accept it. I could ask us all to engage in a long and difficult debate about one of the most pressing issues of our time. I could ask you to cast your vote publicly, to reject this irrevocably cruel, unusual, and ghastly practice. A few weeks ago, the good senator from Greenwood Village spoke about grace and about the need for more of it in this chamber. In light of his words, and in light of this moment, I want you all to know that I'm going to give Senate Bill 182 a dignified death, not a torturous one. I ask that this bill be laid over because I believe wholeheartedly that the way in which we treat each other through this process is as important as the policy itself. So when this bill comes back next session, there will be nothing left to hide behind except this abhorrent, terrible practice. Mr. Chair, I ask that Senate Bill 182 be laid over until May 4th, 2019.
Senator Gonzalez, will you move that it be laid over?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Senate Bill 182 be laid over until May 4th, 2019.
The motion is for Senate Bill 182 to be laid over to May 4th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate Bill 182 will be laid over as requested by the sponsor. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title of Senate Bill 4?
Senate Bill 4 by Senator Donovan, Representative Roberts, concerning measures to address the high cost of health insurance in the state in connection therewith authorizing the state personnel director to implement a pilot program to allow residents of a specified region to participate in state employee medical benefit plans and modifying the health care coverage cooperatives laws to include consumer protections and allow consumers to collectively negotiate rates directly with providers.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 4 and the associated committee report.
To the Health and Human Services Committee report, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this bill was significantly amended in committee, and I would like to briefly address that. The bill originally contained two important parts to address the high cost of health care in the individual market in the high country and across the state. As I walked into this building, being reelected, the number one thing that I had heard from at the doors and on the phone was, please go down to the Capitol and work on health care. And we know that that's a complicated issue, but the urgency of the commentary from the people that I represent and the young families I talk to and the older retired couples making tough decisions, there was a clear need for immediate relief. And so the bill originally contained an aspect that would hopefully provide immediate relief in the highest cost area of our state, and that was a pilot program. The pilot program was also intended to inform another bill that's going through the process of what actual kind of on-the-ground human behavior was going to be. After extensive work and a lot of meetings with stakeholders that I sincerely appreciated, we realized that with the restrictions of this year's budget and just the staggering cost of what healthcare actually means, that the pilot program was not something that the state would financially be able to fiscally manage. So you will see that that pilot program has been struck to the bill, and I ask for your support on the committee report.
Is there further discussion on the Health and Human Services Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The aspect of the bill that we can now focus on is aimed at giving as many tools to the citizens of Colorado in order to address healthcare cost. This is not the only healthcare bill. We have discussed this session. It will not be the end of the healthcare discussion, but it's a very important piece. And what it does is it looks at existing language around the ability for people to form healthcare cooperatives. And so it gives healthcare cooperatives were originally envisioned as perhaps more industry or profession based. So perhaps a number of plumbers in a valley such as the Eagle Valley would come together and form a cooperative to then look at healthcare. The problem has become so significant and severe that it is it's clear that we need to look at cooperatives as a way to return some power to the people. This problem is so large that we need to provide as many answers as possible. And so this is another answer for individuals to come together and form a base of negotiation to work directly with hospitals to bring down the cost of healthcare. You know that in small towns and communities, there certainly is power in numbers, and this bill empowers those numbers to come together under the title of a co-op. So we do have a couple of amendments.
There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read Amendment L006?
Amendment L006, Senate Bill 4 by Senator Donovan, amendment Bill page 18, strike lines 22 through 24, and substitute section 14, act subject to petition effective.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L006.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This takes off the safety clause and returns it with a petition clause. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L006? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment L006 is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the Please read Amendment L005.
Amendment L005 to Senate Bill 4 by Senators Donovan and Smallwood. Amend printed bill page 9, strike lines 25.
Senator Donovan.
I move Amendment L005 to Senate Bill 4.
To the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment was evolved out of a conversation with my colleague who always pays close attention to healthcare bills, and I always appreciate hearing his feedback. The senator from Douglas County flagged some language that, upon further review by both of us, we think perhaps made the bill a little bit more expansive in power of the commissioner to institute and run these co-ops, and that was not the intent of the bill. So I ask for your aye vote on L005 and cede the podium if my colleague cares to comment on this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything the senator mentioned and ask for an aye vote on Amendment 5.
Any further discussion on Amendment L005? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L005. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment L005 is adopted. Further discussion on the bill? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Want to thank the senator from Vail for really being open-minded about this bill. And to be perfectly honest, this was one of those bills early in session that caused me great concern because I saw one half of this bill that I thought was absolutely fantastic, doing really everything we can, continue to do everything we can to address healthcare costs, especially in the rural frontier and resort areas, to say what can we do to get government out of the way. In this particular example, when it comes to creating co-ops, a concept that I think almost everybody that I've spoken with can really get behind. The banding together of employers or municipalities in order to sort of create their own destiny in their own backyard and create a good healthcare plan. So I really, really liked that part of the bill, but was concerned with a lot of other aspects. And I want to commend the senator from Vail because on top of everything else that she's got going on and legislation that she's working on, she was very open to working with me and other stakeholders to craft a bill that I am happy to vote yes for and to co-sponsor. And what I'm hoping is that this will be a model that works and that can potentially be expanded again, and specifically in other rural, resort, and frontier areas. The only concern that I have still with this bill, and again, I'm voting yes and supporting it, the one piece of work that's left in this bill that I didn't get personally was, this bill really gets into the weeds when it comes to the existing laws around co-ops and what can we do as a body to get government out of the way to make co-ops easier to form, easier for those organizations to administer. And again, this is an area that I try to spend a lot of time in, and there's some language in here that even I still don't understand how this is going to really help those co-ops. And most importantly, I want to make positively sure that we're not in any way hurting the formation or the administration of those co-ops. So my guess is as this bill goes forward, which I certainly hope that it does, those concerns will sort of be uncovered along the way. And I would encourage the senator, as I plan to do myself, to continue to listen to those folks that are creating these co-ops to do whatever we can to ensure their success. So again, want to thank the senator for all her hard work and for being very open. Ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 4.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too wish to thank the good senator from Vail for all the hard work and the senator from Douglas County. I guess I have one question is, I don't know what a frontier county is. I think I might represent them, but just to let you know, we have electricity, we drive cars, we have schools, we get the mail every day. We just don't have more than one insurance provider.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 4? Senator Donovan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really am excited about this bill. I think it's going to have incredible impact as we move forward and start to comprehensively look at all the solutions we can provide to different communities. Every place is different. Every town has a different challenge. Every region looks different and needs different solutions for that. This will be a very important solution for the communities that decide that by allowing individuals to band together, they'll be able to really leverage purchasing power and negotiate with hospitals. And we know that rural Colorado are problem solvers. This gives them the tools to be problem solvers with their own issue that's critical to them. And with that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 4 on second reading.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 4. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Senate Bill 4 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title to Senate Bill 166?
Senate Bill 166 by Senators Fields and Gardner and Representative Roberts concerning the post board revoking the certification of a peace officer who is found to have made an untruthful statement.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 166, also the Judiciary Committee report and the Appropriation report.
To the Judiciary Committee report. Senator Fields.
Yes.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Judiciary Committee, and just by way of background, in order to speak to the report, speaking to the bill, this is the process for post-board revocation of certification for those certified law enforcement officers who have made a false or untruthful statement in a material matter, an investigation, a hearing, and so forth. It must be proved by clear and convincing evidence. Now, the Judiciary Committee report made some changes to ensure that these officers who have a certification, the equivalent of a license, receive due process. And I was very concerned about that. Those of you who have been here a while know this bill has been around. It has not been particularly successful. It has been too broad. It's been too narrow. We think we've done it right this time, but even so, we need to amend the Judiciary Committee report, and therefore, I have an amendment. Okay. And I can never rid myself of my house ways, so we have to adopt the Judiciary Committee report. Mr. Chair, I move the Judiciary Committee report.
Is there further discussion on the Judiciary Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Judiciary Committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report, Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the Appropriations Committee added some $40,000 just for the program.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read Amendment L007?
Amendment L007 to Senate Bill 166 by Senator Gardner, amend the Judiciary Committee report dated March 13, 2019.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L007.
To the amendment, Senator Gardner.
Thank you. And members, this is to the Judiciary Committee report. I guess there are no subtle questions here in the Senate. The amendment amends the Judiciary Committee report around this process issue. So the bill and the Judiciary Committee report itself ensure that a due process proceeding is conducted for the certified law enforcement officer of their post-certification. And there are minimum due process requirements for that. There is an appeal to the post board after that due process proceeding. Now, if the department doesn't have a compliant due process proceeding, it has to be conducted by the post board, but thereafter there is still an appeal to the full board. What the amendment does is ensure that that appeal is a show cause kind of proceeding, and that since the fact finding has already taken place, that certification is revoked at the time of the initial hearing. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L007.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L007? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Amendment L007 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Gardner.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, we renew our motion for the adoption on second reading of Senate Bill 166.
Is there further discussion? Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I was a no vote on this in committee, and I'm still a no vote, and I'd like to explain why. You know, there is already a process for this. Nobody wants law enforcement officers that lie in an internal investigation or in court or use of force reports, so they need to be fired. Believe me, I fired several that lied, not just in those kind of incidences, but if they lied right out in general, because you can't use them. They're no good to you in law enforcement because you get what they call a Brady jacket. And that information goes to the district attorney that this person lied, and then what happens is they can never make an arrest because that Brady jacket follows them. It follows them into court, and they will be impeached. They will be impugned because they lied during an investigation or in a report. So the simple solution is that they get fired. Problem is, police chiefs don't like firing people because they have that pesky civil service issue. They have unions they have to deal with. They have higher-ups that they have to deal with. When a sheriff fires somebody, they stay fired. So this bill is an attempt to get around the civil service. It's an attempt to get around the due process set out by police unions that already exist. Let me tell you the process on what happens. So if an officer or deputy lies, you fill out what is called a Form 6, and you send it to post, and then the post will then take away their certificate. Now, that certificate's good for 3 years, so they can go to another police department. But what happened is a bill that the good senator and I from Denver passed a couple years ago that says you cannot hide personnel records. You had to open them up upon request from another law enforcement agency. So if somebody got fired for lying, that's going to be in their personnel file, and it's going to be in their internal affairs file. And then when that new agency comes looking to see if this, do the background, to see if they want to hire this deputy or officer, they'll see that they have an administrative conviction, so to speak, for lying, and they're not going to be hired. Again, this is, I think, just an attempt to get around civil service rules. And also, I think it opens up law enforcement executives for litigation if they do fire somebody. Because let's say an internal investigation was done on the lying. It goes down to post under this bill, and now post has another administrative hearing, and post says, you know what? We don't think they did lie. We're not going to revoke their post certificate. So now what do we do? So we already have a determination from the sheriff or possibly a police chief who said that they lied. And now we have an administrative bureaucratic body saying they didn't lie. So that deputy that got fired now has a court action and can sue because they say, hey, I didn't lie. I've got proof. The post board said I didn't lie. And now that opens up for lawsuits. So I would ask for a no vote on this bill, colleagues. Thank you.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We urge an aye vote on Senate Bill 166, basically because it's good public policy as we think about making sure that we're restoring and maintaining trust in our community with law enforcement. This bill was brought to our attention from law enforcement. They believe that this is the right path to take because we don't want law enforcement folks to be like shopping from one police department to another, and they still have access to their certification. So this is the right thing to do, and I do urge an aye vote on Senate Bill 166.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I most respectfully, and I say that in all sincerity, most respectfully disagree with my friend and colleague, the former sheriff from Weld County. This bill does not change the ability of any law enforcement executive to terminate the employment of one of their officers or deputies. It deals with the post-certification of that. The term of art really in Colorado is peace officer. It is born of the fact that for many years we had instances in Colorado where certified peace officers bounced from department to department and their records were hidden. And there was a bill to not allow the sealing of those employment kinds of records. But this is in the nature of a licensing proceeding. There is a fear that my colleague has expressed that if the post board were not to revoke a post certification after termination of employment, that would beget litigation, presumably successful litigation is the assertion. The fact of the matter is this is a very narrow bill. One can be fired, presumably for not showing up to work on time, but their post-certification cannot be revoked for that. But that would be a legitimate termination. They could be terminated for lying about their leave, whether the purpose of their leave, the reason for their leave, a myriad of other things. And those are legitimate employment terminations, but they would not, under current law, allow for a post-certification revocation, a revocation of their right to be a peace officer anywhere in the state. Now, this bill limits that certification to the most serious of offenses with regard to truthfulness, and it requires a standard of clear and convincing evidence. But just because post-certification is not ultimately revoked on a preponderance standard at the administrative level, at the employment level, it doesn't change that. We ask for an aye vote. We believe it's good policy to have a post-certification revocation. Without it, we don't have any kind of process to deal with an officer lying on the witness stand, other than they can be terminated. We don't have any process to deal with them lying in an internal affairs investigation, other than they can be terminated, but we cannot revoke their post-certification, and it seems right and proper that we be able to do so, and I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respectfully and adamantly disagree with my good senator from Colorado Springs. We do have a process, folks. They're fired. A Form 6 is sent out. It's sent to post. And their certification is then revoked because they're not working for law enforcement. It's true, you can get fired for not showing up for work. And you send that Form 6 in, and post suspends that post certificate, because they're not working for a law enforcement agency. Now, if another agency wants to pick them up because they don't show up for work, then that's in their personnel file because of the bill the good senator from Denver and I ran a couple of years ago. And then that decision is made by the chief or the sheriff whether to hire him. If somebody lies under an internal affairs investigation or in court or an official report, the chiefs need to have the guts to fire him. And if they fire him, they send a Form 6 down to post, and then that certificate is suspended or revoked already. If they look for another job because of that bill, the next law enforcement agency will say, hey, this guy's got a Brady jacket. He's not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to use him at all. He can't make any arrests. He can't testify in court. So we're not going to hire him. So we do have a process. And so I'd ask for a no vote.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respectfully ask for an aye vote, and given the very strong disagreement over public policy here, this bill might benefit from being read at length, but I'm not going to request that. Just ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 166? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 166. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Senate Bill 166 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 85.
Senate Bill 85 by Senators Danielson, Pedersen, Representatives Buckner, and Gonzalez Gutierrez concerning the creation of the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act in order to implement measures to prevent pay disparities.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 85 lay over until tomorrow, April 3rd.
The motion before the body is to lay over Senate Bill 85 to tomorrow, April 3rd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The bill will be laid over as requested by the Majority Leader. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of House Bill 1031.
House Bill 1031 by Representative Gray and Senator Gonzalez concerning allowing each parental guardian to serve as a minor medical marijuana patient's primary caregiver in connection with making an appropriation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that that we reject the committee reports and send this back to Appropriations Committee.
I can make. Do you want to make a motion?
Sure.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that House Bill 1031 be referred to the Appropriations Committee, and I ask for an aye vote.
The motion before the body is for House Bill 1031 to be referred back to the Appropriations Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 1031 will be referred back to the Appropriations Committee. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 167.
Senate Bill 167 by Senator Danielson, Representatives Exum and Durant concerning the creation of a Colorado Professional Firefighter's License Plate.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 167, but I did pull it off the consent calendar to amend it, so I move Senate Bill 167.
Senator Danielson and the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee loved the bill and referred it to the Committee of the Whole. With the appropriate appropriation, and I move the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. Senator Danielson to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L001.
There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the title, or will you please read Amendment L001?
Amendment L001, Senate Bill 167 by Senator Danielson, Member Bill, page 2, line 4, strike fighters and substitute fighters.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were a few technical cleanups that the department needed, the advocates needed, and just to clarify the process. And so this just corrected a few mistakes that we made through the earlier committee hearings, and I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L001.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L001? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment L001 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. This is a simple measure. It is honoring Colorado professional firefighters. I want to thank all the advocates for the creation of this license plate. And I think that all of us hold in our hearts a special place for first responders and Colorado firefighters all across the state. And I appreciate the support that the measure has had this far. I also want to give a little shout out to the hardworking drafting attorney, Jerry Payne, who was very patient with us through this process. I appreciate your work, as always. And colleagues, I urge and I vote on this measure to honor the service of Colorado professional firefighters.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 167? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 167. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Senate Bill 167 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before us is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Committee will rise and report.
What was the bill number?
106. Well, I'm going to see if we can do it today.
The Senate will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, will you please add Senator Foote and Senator Pedersen to the roll call? Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee will lead reports that in consideration of the following test bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendation on Senate Bill 4 as amended, Senate Bill 166 amended, Senate Bill 167 as amended, passed second reading order, rise place accounted for third reading and final passage, House Bill 1172 passed second reading order, rise place accounted for third reading and final passage, Senate Bill 85 later until 4/3/19 retaining this place in the calendar, Senate Bill 182 later until 5/4/19 retaining this place in the calendar, House Bill 1031 referred to the Committee on Appropriations.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 004 as amended, Senate Bill 166 as amended, Senate Bill 167 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1172 passed on second reading and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 085 laid over until 4/3/2019 and retaining its place on the calendar. Senate Bill 182 laid over until 5/4/2019, retaining its place on the calendar. House Bill 1031 referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Consideration of House Amendment to Senate Bills. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 181.
Senate Bill 181 by Senators Van Bergen, Foote, Representatives Becker, and Carveo concerning additional public welfare protections regarding contract of oil and gas operations in connection with making an appropriation.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 181 and consideration of House amendments to it lay over until tomorrow, April 3rd, 2019.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 181 will be laid over until 4/3/2019, Wednesday. Committee reports.
April 1st, 2019, Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs, after Consideration of Mayor's Committee as follows. Senate Bill 185 be amended as follows as so amended. Be referred to Committee to hold the favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. April 1st, 2019, Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs, after Consideration of Mayor's Committee as following. Senate Bill 202 be referred favorably to Committee on Appropriations.
Change in sponsorship. The following change in bill sponsorship will occur. Senator Heisey will be added as a Senate Joint Prime Sponsor with Senator Janal and Representative Singer on Senate Bill 19-177. In response to a request from the House for a conference committee on House Bill 1131, the Senate conferees are Senators Winter, Chair, and Fields, and Senator Smallwood on the first conference committee on House Bill 1131. Announcements. Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I have a wonderful group of constituents who are here in the building from the North Fork. North Fork is home to some of the most amazing small-scale agriculture and production in the state. They also are kind of the hotbed of the cottage foods industry. So if you want some delicious snacks or to meet some wonderful folks from the North Fork, they have traveled far to be here and would love to greet you. They're down in the foyer and will be there till about 1 o'clock. Last year they had goat cheese that was to die for. I would expect the same level of culinary snacking this year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we are joined by the Colorado Christian University, which is, I actually represent the area that the university is actually located, and we're so excited to have them with us today. They join us every year, and today we are going to acknowledge not only what they contribute to our community, but also a new program that they have in the works. The Colorado Christian University is proud to announce its first doctoral level degree program, a Doctor of Nursing practice, is Visionary Leadership. This program will be offered through the School of Nursing and Health Professions in the College of Adult and Graduate Studies. The nursing programs at Colorado Christian University continue to grow exponentially, and for good reason. The new doctoral program will continue our tradition of educating competent, compassionate nursing leaders. As nursing shortages continue, CCU is dedicated to ensuring highly qualified professionals enter the workforce with enhanced leadership and nursing practice skills. We have them over here on the side, and Senator Lundin has a little bit more to add.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I would like to continue with the accolades for Colorado Christian University. Many of their leadership and students are with us here on the floor today. Please take some time after this moment and interact with them. You will find it to be a positive and encouraging interaction. But to continue about the university, 30 years ago, Colorado Christian University launched its first master's degree. Now they're taking another tremendous step forward in their calling to become an even greater university by offering their first doctoral program. This is truly a momentous day in the history of this local university. Colorado Christian University is excited to expand their educational offerings to the highest level as they strive to prepare visionary leaders for the profession who view nursing as ministry. I encourage you all to welcome the good folks from Colorado Christian University.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Janot.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the Senate Local Government Committee, we will be meeting at 2 o'clock today in our usual room. We are going to be hearing confirmation about the Housing Board, as well as House Bill 1087, House Bill 1213, and Senate Bill 200. So see you at 2.
Senator Court.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance Committee and members who have bills in the Finance Committee. We changed our calendar a bit. It is on the calendar today. We will be hearing Senate Bill 197, Senate Bill 153, Senate Bill 192, and Senate Bill 157 at 2 o'clock upstairs. So it's a little different than it was a day ago, but that is the schedule for today. Thank you.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just a quick announcement to check your calendars. On Thursday night, the annual reception of the Colorado Society of Eye Physicians and Surgeons are hosting a reception at the University Club. Again, Thursday, 5:30 to 7:30. Come and you can see clearly now.
Senator Foote.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an announcement about state affairs. We're not meeting today, but there is a change to the calendar tomorrow afternoon. We did have Senate Bill 196 by Senators Lee and Danielson on the calendar for tomorrow afternoon. At the sponsor's request, that will be moved to Monday the 8th at 1:30 in state affairs. So not tomorrow, but on Monday the 8th, we will hear Senate Bill 196.
Having no further announcements, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you don't need to be here, but we are going to recess to read some bills across. So, Mr. President, I move the Senate recess until 2 p.m. today.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess until 1400 today.